Good afternoon and welcome to Business Stars once again. I'm Kathy Rimmer and today I'm here with Ben McElroy. So thanks for joining us today, Ben.
Oh, thank you for having me, Kathy. Yeah, pleasure.
Excellent. And it's been a very good time to bring you on to Business Stars to give some expert advice for us because you've got the qualification and experience in counselling and psychotherapy. And over 15 years of experience. So we're grateful to have you at this time to share with us some details of businesses. There's been a lot happening and mental health is a very important subject, which you obviously have the experience to back. So the main topic for today, we're going to be talking about grief. So what I'll do while Ben's talking about that is I'll bring up a quick little image here. And if you could talk us through that grief cycle and what some people may be experiencing through this whole coronavirus, job seeker, job keeper, job loss, rental, all sorts of things happening.
Yeah, so I think one of the first things to acknowledge is that oftentimes, when life is going well for us, we're very focused on external circumstances and we're kind of just going with things as they are. But oftentimes when a crisis occurs such as this, it can really kind of stop us in our tracks and automatically we're kind of focused into our internal world. And that can be challenging for some people if we haven't had experience doing that, which is very common. But being foiled in our internal experience where, there's some deeper fears and emotions and thoughts, it can be quite confronting.
Yeah.
And if it's a prolonged crisis, such as we've had, that can really start challenging us personally and perhaps the profession as well. And so just on that graphic there, which I think is just not on the screen again, if we could get that back up on the screen.
It's just coming back up again. So the first one they talk about with the Kubler-Ross's grief cycle has been around for a while is actually denial.
Yeah, the graphic is on.
Yeah. Lost Ben. Okay, hang on. We'll stop recording. Okay, I've got Ben back and we're resuming the recording. So we were talking about denial. So if you can talk us through that in a little detail, Ben.
Yeah, right. So yeah, sure. So for us, a lot of our normal circumstance, denial can be one of the first responses that can come up for us, which can show up in a number of different ways. Firstly, could be avoidance, where we're not really connecting with the feelings and the thoughts that are going on about our current situation. We're trying to just cope and get along, and keep on keeping on, as they say. But given that we've can't return to our normal circumstances, where we're often faced with that continual experience of which then can show up as confusion. Is it going to return to normal? How do I fit with this? And then possibly, it's saying here, elation can be another one of the things that come in, which almost a bit of a false positive. That it's okay, nothing to worry about, it'll all go back to normal. But then if the crisis goes on longer, we can then move into shock and fear. And from there, we can sort of hit a bit of a fight, flight, freeze reaction, which is very much a kind of a trauma response. When we go into fight, flight, or freeze, fight is usually, can be related to anger or more aggressiveness, which doesn't have to necessarily be a physical thing. It can be just, arguments, having difficulty in relating with people or with self. and fear can result with these intense emotions once they come to the surface. So again, it's important to note that these stages of grief can overlap, so that they're not like a straight line. It can come in and out with waves. So the next stage that's sort of identified is anger, which starts to come forward. Frustration is a common way that anger will show up. Oftentimes frustration is like a lower level of anger where we're not actually really acknowledging the depth of anger that's there. We're just kind of getting into the surface of it, which can also show up as irritation and anxiety.
And there's so much uncertainty and change at the moment that people will be fluctuating between, as you say, the denial and anger and acceptance.
Yes, and depression can set in then as well. And depression, despite what people tend to think, depression is usually an absence of feeling. And it can be when we have an unreal expectation about life that's not being met. So that can be confronting as well. It can be reality inducing in the sense that we have to really face our circumstances as they are, not what we wish them to be. And that can then sort of help us to move through to the depression a little bit. So, but where depression shows up, we can feel overwhelmed, helplessness and hostility and flight. It's saying here, flight is really about escaping physically, but if that can't happen, it can be emotionally escaping the situation. So
interesting.
Important to recognise that.
Yeah. And then a lot of the image shows that it looks like you're moving through and out of that cycle once you get to the next stage is bargaining. What's your interpretation of that?
Yeah, bargaining is an interesting word to use. And again, it can be more about that the person's trying to make sense of their experience and what's happening for them and how they're going to relate to others now through this experience, and finding meaning, which I think is one of those things for all of us human beings, that we're daily in the relationship with life where we are establishing meaning for ourselves or attempting to do that. So a crisis can really shake that up, and so we kind of, we're going about the business of trying to develop a new relationship with others and with ourselves, which can lead to acceptance if we move through it in a healthy way, which generally is that we're getting support to deal with these stages of grief. If we're getting support to do that, we can move to a place more of acceptance around our circumstances and how we're feeling, and accepting reality as it is. I think that's one of the big parts of acceptance that to me, in my experience working with people, is that when we accept reality as it is, not what we wish it to be or want it to be, then we can start to really bring some healing to the grief. But that takes time, and as I was saying before, we can move through these layers interchangeably and at different times. So it isn't a straight line, like there's no straight stick on the tree of life. It's basically a changing environment all the time. So yeah, in that sense, we will move through the different stages. And one of the common things people say is, when will this be over? When will this grief? And it's again a question that we can't answer the same for everybody. There is no time.
So everyone's different in how they process, I imagine too.
Yep, and it's going to depend on a lot of factors, what their prior experience has been in life, childhood trauma, their history with mental health. Those sorts of things will depend on how we move through and the speed of how we move through. And again, it's not really important to establish how fast you move through it, just that you do move through at your own pace, which will be different for each person.
Yeah.
Getting
Yes, support. That's what I was going to say. The big thing is getting help, asking for help.
Yep. And it really is to to not stay in that denial phase, which that first phase can be very powerful and very prolonged. And particularly if we get some kind of normalcy back into our lives, where things are starting to get back to normal, denial can actually kick back in again. There's no problem here, get along with things until another crisis erupts and we're kind of back to where we were. So it is inner work to keep on to this, but it's something that's important, because if we can do that inner work, we'll get to a new place. We'll get to a new place of growth and understanding and awareness, which can be all the more rewarding for our lives if we're willing to do that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you very much for joining us. And the one thing I do want to mention is grief is not, a lot of people associate it with losing a loved one is usually, but it's not. People grieve for many things. It's the loss, it's the shock, it's a crisis, as you say. They could not realise they're going through grief.
Yes, exactly. It is really important to recognise that loss it can be related to any loss in life: loss of employment, loss of living circumstances, loss of relationships, loss of loved ones, those sorts of things. Loss of pets, even. That can be a big one as well. But in this scenario that we have now, is definitely a loss of normal circumstances in life that people are used to, and that can really shake up. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time. And if we can finish up, if somebody does want help, where are some places they can go for assistance is a starting point?
Yeah, so if any emergency needs, places like Lifeline are great to be in contact with. Beyond Blue, some of those 24-hour lines around depression and anxiety, mental health are really great. The Heal for Life Foundation is really great in dealing with trauma. Okay. And trauma is not just an accident. Trauma can be related to any life experience that's been overwhelming, emotionally overwhelming. That can be related to trauma.
Okay.
So the Heal for Life Foundation can help with that. You can find those all online. You can Google them and find their numbers. They're readily available. And there's actually you'll find some further organisations as well that do similar work, but there's some of the ones that I can recommend.
Yeah, wonderful. And we'll put some links in the comments below. So if anyone's looking for those, we'll have some links in there too. Thank you very much for your time today, Ben. We really appreciate helping out businesses, and businesses have that extra layer if they worry about their staff and employees and contractors are like their family, and they've had an extra layer of pressure at the moment as well. So thank you for your time with that. Is there anything you'd like to add before we finish up today?
Well, thanks for having me, Kathy. I appreciate you extending the invitation to me. And just stress the importance of people reaching out for support if they need it. There's nothing, it's perfectly okay to do that. We're all human beings. We're all on our own journeys at different places. But, it's important to recognise if things aren't going so great or feeling so great to please do that and get that support you need.
Yeah, and I love that line of what if. What if you go and talk to someone and there's actually nothing wrong? You haven't lost anything, you've had a good talk, but if you need the extra, you've got the support. So, no one's going to walk in and think you're crazy if you want to talk. And I think there's a bit of stigma with that sometimes.
Yes. And particularly, I think for men, that's been the case as well. And it's something that's slowly starting to change, which is really good, because we all need to, face our feelings and feel our feelings, and they won't harm us to do that. It'll actually help us if we do that. So really important to keep moving on that.
Yeah, wonderful. And I know you're very much an advocate for helping men through those times as well. Thanks once again, and have a wonderful time. And for Business Stars, we've got YouTube. Just make sure you subscribe as we get more videos. We've got the website businessstars.com.au. And if you have any further questions, we're able to contact Ben and get some answers for you too if you have a specific one. He's offered to help with that. So thanks again, Ben. Have a lovely day, and we'll catch up another time.
Thank you, Kathy. Pleasure.